Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Data Culture Voices from the Community series. If you're looking to get tips and tricks on how to successfully roll out a data culture at your organization and what gotchas to avoid, this is the place to be. We'll be featuring experts that are leading organizations on a journey to be more data-driven. I'm your host, Vicky Kamram. I'm part of Tableau's customer success team, and one of my responsibilities is in helping organizations and customers scale analytics widely. And with me today is my co-host, Sagar.
Thank you, Vic. I'm also part of customer success team at Tableau, founder of one of the Tableau community called VisConnect, which helps people in connecting with the art of data visualization and storytelling.
The agenda today has two parts. I'll be doing a quick introduction on why we're discussing data culture and why we're launching this series. That will be followed by a panel of three speakers: Paul Chapman from Jones Lang LaSalle, Lane Kariska from the Information Lab, and Eva Murray from Exasol, all sharing their experiences around how one gets the commitment to embark on the journey to build a data culture. So why data culture? I've been with Tableau for about 7 years, and for the first 4 years of my job, the questions I got from customers around being successful with Tableau featured the product. How do I use Tableau? How do I build visualizations? What is this thing called self-service analytics? How do I do Excel in Tableau in a better way? And then in the last few years, I've noticed a shift. Customers are now coming to us and asking us questions like, how do I scale analytics across the enterprise? We have pockets of success. There are users who really know how to take data and are driving outsized returns. But then there are other groups that are really struggling. And this whole thing is requiring me to do things like building communities to enable hundreds of users. And we don't have the skill sets, and we don't even know how to start and think about this. So about a year ago, Tableau launched a methodology called Blueprint, which was our way of collating all the best practices that customers need to follow to scale analytics across the enterprise. But as we started looking at content out on the web to help customers start their journey, to help customers deal with the tricky parts of actually building a data culture, we noticed that there was a gap. There was a lot of product content out there, lots of information about how to use the product, lots of information on what the product did, but very little information on how are customers really going about their journey. And so that was the genesis and the launch of the Data Culture series that we're doing. And in this series, the kind of topics we'll be tackling are what are common gotchas to launching a data culture? How do you get executive buy-in? How do you get funding? What successes are customers having? And how are they building talent? So these are all deep topics that customers need to think about and do things very differently. There is data out there which shows that there are lots of organizations looking to create a data culture, but only 8% are successful. And so the panel here today that we'll be introducing is going to be talking about some of those gotchas. From a panel standpoint, we have three great speakers. We have Lane Kariska from the Information Lab, we have Paul Chapman from JLL, and we have Eva Murray from Exasol. To start off, why don't we do a quick round of introductions? Lane, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Hi, I'm Lane. I'm a data analyst and I'm currently consulting, specializing in Tableau and Alteryx. I'm from the Information Lab, the data school, and I've been working with Tableau and Alteryx for about 2 years now. I've worked across a variety of companies from small ones to multinationals such as BCG and PwC.
Paul?
I'm Paul Chapman. I'm the Global Director for Performance Management, Business Intelligence and Innovation at JLL. I've been with JLL for about 4 years now, all about trying to build out our data culture and build out a return on investment from analytics and BI. Been a Tableau ambassador for a number of years now as well, which I'm very honoured to do, help run the London Tableau user group. And this year I was very fortunate to be named as one of the Data IQ 100 most influential people in data.
Thank you. And last but not least, Eva?
Hello, everyone. My name is Eva Murray, and I'm a technology evangelist with Exasol and also a 3-time Tableau Zen Master. And I'm all about the data and the data culture, ideally, but also data communities and growing those. And one of my side projects is Makeover Monday, that hopefully many of you have heard of, which is a social data project that is run for the community, by the community, and helps people to get better at analyzing and visualizing data.
And a shameless plug for Makeover Monday, and those of you who haven't heard about it, it's probably single-handedly been one of the most influential, projects out there that has, I would say, increased the analytics IQ and data IQ of a lot of people. So thank you for your support, Eva.
Thank you, Vic.
So let's start with the I think it's important for us to first define data culture. It's an oft-used term. You hear analytics culture, you hear data-driven organizations, you hear about data centricity. It would help all of us, I think, to first anchor on a definition. So Eva, you want to start off and say, when you think about data culture, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is this lofty ambition that everyone knows how to use data, everyone has access to it, everyone is quite proficient in making data part of their daily work and producing things that are based on, facts, not just gut feel or assumptions. But I think it starts with something really small where people talk about data, where they are aware of data, where given that everything that happens around them in their work and their personal life, they question things that are fake news or just made up stuff, and they recognize when something just is too good to be true or doesn't look quite right, because I think that's where it starts. Not everyone has a statistics background or is a data analyst, but if someone can say, well, that number just looks a bit outrageous, we should question that, I think that's a really good starting point. And from there, having that mindset really helps you to then develop a proper data culture in your organization.
Paul, you want to jump in and give your thoughts?
Yeah, I totally agree with what Eva says there. I think it's all about that inquisitive starting point. As to generally, this will start out with some analysts or somebody looking at data as part of their job and then understanding how much further it can go, but then growing that within the organization as well. So getting your management levels to start understanding how data can help them to improve what they're doing, and moving up to leadership and C-suite and actually having them using data as part of their meetings rather than a static screenshot of a dashboard in a PowerPoint presentation. That's is when I think we've really engaged with leadership teams and started to build out a culture at their level as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. And Lane?
I would agree. I think with the data culture, you want to include as many people as possible, and the people that are going to be sort of participating or interacting with the data are going to be data analysts. And so for me, it really starts with them. It starts with the curiosity that you build within people to see data more than just a way of reporting it, but to understand why certain things happen and to push that further and ask, the bigger questions. And that's for me how you see change in the business.
So thank you for that. And just to add Tableau's definition, I think we've identified, kind of to make it more formal and put a framework around it, 5 key themes to a data culture. We feel it starts with commitment. The organization needs to make a commitment. Executives need to make a commitment. And then we've noticed that there is an element of talent that needs to be in place. There's an element of sharing in the organization as part of their culture to share data sets across silos. There is an element of trust. People need to trust the data. And then lastly, you need a mindset around a data culture. Have been certain themes that we've kind of seen our customers define as part of the data culture. So let's kind of fast forward and let's wave the magic wand. And you're at an organization, you're working with one, and they have this magical thing called a data culture. Can you just kind of paint a picture of like, what is this organization doing differently? Are there certain key things which will just stand out for somebody who's part of that organization versus somebody who's part of an organization where there is really, they're struggling with the data culture?
I'll pick this one up first because I've got this analogy in my head that I've been working on for the last few minutes. And this is about driving a car. When I look at the different parts of that ecosystem that we're in, you've got Tableau, they are the ones producing the car. You've got consulting companies and people in the community teaching people, so they're like the driving instructors. And then you've got everyone who's a user, at various stages of how good of a driver they are. Some people come into it with a lot of pre-knowledge because maybe they got to, be a passenger with their parents a lot. Maybe they even got to drive around, in their, not backyard, but maybe they have a farm and they got to drive a tractor. And then other people have not really participated in traffic much, and they come to it and they're like, okay, I need a lot of help here. And it's perfectly fine. And everyone needs to be picked up where they start. And I think when we talk about, if you have a data culture, what I'm imagining is this whole country where everything is about mobility. And it's not just about cars, but it's about cars and bikes and scooters and trains and all these different modes of transport, and people just get around and they get to their destination. And some people are faster, some people are slower, but everyone kind of gets to where they need to be. They get there safely without, accidents and obstacles. And maybe, like that's kind of the image I have in mind, a system that just works, where you have lots of different streams where things flow left to right. Some people maybe even fly in little, solar powered air taxi things. But that's what I'm envisaging. It's not one size fits all, but it's the right size fits the people who need to use it. And people have access to what they need. They embrace it. It doesn't have to dominate everything they do, but it should support them so that they can make the right decisions, the right recommendations in everything. And I imagine, if 10, 20 years ago we had that, what would the world look like today if we had built products where the data said, yeah, that's a good idea, rather than products where we said, well, that will make a lot of money, even if it destroys the planet, and those kind of things. So I think just a system where there's transparency and mobility for people to do the best work, that's what I envisage as that nirvana of data culture.
Lane, you want to go next?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that vision as well. But instead of having lots of different modes of transport, for me, it's about getting people to use those different modes of transport or to even get on the transport itself. And that's why, for me, data culture is all about community. It's all about getting people to participate, to interact with the data. When I was working for a smaller company, one of the big things that they wanted me to work on was try to get as much engagement up as possible. And one of the things that I thought of was creating some sort of agony aunt type newsletter where people would, input some questions that they had, and then how they went about and solved it in Tableau. And then this would then be published on a, agony aunt type newsletter, and that problem would probably be faced by a lot of other people, but just haven't spoken up about it. So it's a good way to kind of get people involved. We had, competitions, so you kind of create your champions from that. And with that, you kind of motivate people to get involved, to help each other, to share, to learn from each other. I think that's a crucial part of creating a data culture, is the community and the people.
Thank you. And Paul?
Yeah, so I'm fortunate to work for an organisation which has been recognised as having a pretty decent data culture, but it's probably taken us 3-4 years of hard work to get to that point. For me, it starts really with having some executive sponsorship, right? Having somebody at a leadership level who understands some of the value in data and allows you to invest in the right tools, allows you to bring in some people, and gives you the freedom to actually try new things, fail fast, learn from that, and then be able to move on. So that allows you to start experimenting with the tools that we've got, looking at your data, to be able to try and find new ways of communicating that, and then take the business on a journey as well. It's one thing providing them with a dashboard, but there's the whole business partnering piece of, well, how do you use this? How do you maximize the value? Do you want to be creating a culture with your business users and executives where you have 1,000 filters and everyone comes up with a different answer? Or do you want to be able to tell a story with your data? And then as people start seeing you do that, they start seeing you unlock the benefit that is inherently within our data as well. And then people want to get on that journey. So you'll have your data engineers that might want to be troubleshooting how they prep their data. And then you've got our analysts and our viz builders who then want to take part in things like Makeover Monday, Workout Wednesday, storytelling with data activities to try and improve their skills and how they can actually do that. And that becomes an infectious time within the organisation. And we actually created a role of a director of our community of excellence. We have that, and that person in single parts is really all about sharing content across the organisation, developing standards and best practices, building this community of experts, sending them to conferences, allowing them to certifying the tools that they're in, and giving them capacity to do things outside of work that will help them to grow. But then they'll bring those skills and talents back in, and people then want to be part of that team, and they want to be trying to find insights and look at what the next version of Tableau is going to bring, and be part of the beta programs and have that energy and excitement within that team.
Awesome. And Eva, just thinking about your kind of car analogy, one of the things which often doesn't get discussed is the concept of governance. But again, same thing, if you want that ecosystem of people to be driving, you need to have a set of rules. It's not like, nobody can drive and everything's controlled for them, but you need to have certain rules so that people don't go hit each other while they're driving. And you need that element of trust where people know that if there is a stoplight, somebody's going to come and stop, and you're expecting other actors to kind of realize that you're part of the shared ecosystem. So love the car analogy. And Paul, thanks for bringing in the kind of, the examples from JLL. And this kind of leads on to the next question. Paul, you started talking a little bit about, executives. And so you may want to start with JLL, or if you've also seen this with other companies, what level of executives are actually talking about the need to create a data culture, actually have a vision that they've stated? I'm just curious from your standpoint, is there a certain, is this coming from the CEO, or is this somewhere down below? What are you seeing there? So, Paul, coming back to kind of taking the conversation to the next level from where you were talking about, it starts with executive commitment. So what level of executive commitment are you seeing? Who is talking about this? Why are they talking about this? How did they start caring about it? Would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, so I would say in my organisation, it started with a very senior director who had a passion for asking questions, right? And the best way of answering questions is through using data, and was very committed to helping to advocate what we could do. If you gave us the data, we could answer a lot of questions. And we're a professional services company, so we have a lot of clients. Generally, we're asking the same kind of questions, and helped us break down those silos of not then being able to ask the same question and answer it to client A, and then the same question to client B. We can actually look at it holistically, and then you can bring that data together and do benchmarking and driver analytics and understand trends and things from that point. And then we get to present that to the C-suite and actually, present into our board and our chief exec, and really take them on that journey as well and show them the value of what we could do. And the journey hasn't finished yet, so we are still trying to get them to be using dashboards live in board meetings, as opposed to taking a static image and putting it into a PowerPoint deck, which I think everyone struggles with, but they are understanding the value, and we're trying to improve the communication that we give to them, making it more direct for their audience. And that ties up as well with data literacy. So, we've got members of the team at the moment are really trying to work on what a data literacy program would look like and how that helps across the organization, because again, as we become more data centric and data becomes everywhere, and we're in corporate real estate, so we have smart buildings, sensors, We have IoT devices everywhere. Our levels of data consumption are huge, and to be able to cut through that and be able to provide that key information to the right decision makers at the right time is a real skill. So trying to teach data as a second language almost is part of the mission of what we're trying to do to help get that really exec buy-in and commitment.
And Paul, maybe I can follow up, but also ask a question here. When you get to a
Sure.
point where, you know, it's great that people ask questions, especially the execs, and they want the data to support, you know, the answers. How do you go about the questions that seem so simple, but from a data perspective are so complex, you know, where they might say, well, what if we looked at this and this, but behind the scenes, that means maybe a week's worth of data engineering just to get all the relevant data together to provide the answer for them. Because then you get to a point where you don't want to discourage them from asking those questions, but you also want them to appreciate that not everything is an instant response from the analyst who just clicks a few buttons.
Yeah, and I'd say what we try and do is go on even before we get to the point of trying to build that visualization, we look at how we discuss business requirements with our end users, right? And the process we go through to understand, well, actually, what is it you're after? Are you after some insights at the board level or insights for the troops on the ground? And they often want something that's going to answer every question. And the reality is you probably want two different views, right? The exec just want this clear, very clean trend or a single point to go at, whereas the troops on the ground probably want to know the ins and outs of every single item that you've got. So we try and take them on a business requirements journey. We try and also help very early on discuss what the return on investment is. So one thing we have been doing for a number of years now is that every dashboard that we build has a return on investment on it. We're not just building pretty dashboards per se anymore that people like, but you have the so what answer. Actually, it's making sure that there is a real output. Is this going to reduce our costs, increase our productivity, drive compliance, or even increase revenue? And if it is, how do we action that and measure it and put that in place? And then we also structure the team to actually have the team that will build and design and our analysts, and then a separate team that's our business partners. And that team really helps with the communication, the training, the usage statistics. We use eye tracking to really understand, is the key part of the dashboard where people are really looking and how we get that insight and cutting through it. And then, helping them afterwards to find those insights and be able to dig that story out within the data. So it's it's taken us a number of years to get to that point of understanding all the different parts that we have to bring in. But ultimately, our execs now are getting better at asking questions. If you speak to Fee Gordon in our team, she takes them through the Moscow method of, must have, could have, should have, and, really tries to narrow that down. She also does a design thinking training sessions. So people are really understanding what they're trying to get at the start. So we do that all very early on, so that as we start to bring the data out and we do some proof of concepts, we actually we early on work out actually is the juice going to be worth the squeeze in that? Are we going to extract the value that we think, or actually we should park this and it's a one-off piece of work? It didn't really go where we wanted to, and then we can move on to the next thing. So by having that ROI, we can do that prioritization and be able to ebb and flow as we need to.
Cool. Yeah. It's not easy.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. And trial and error, we get it wrong more than we get it right. But the thing is, we learn from that, and everyone's encouraged to fail fast and move on.
And Paul, that is an interesting question, because I think, and we see this where at Tableau, when we think about data culture, we start talking about mindsets, that there are just some organizations that have that mindset of experimentation, that mindset around using techniques like design thinking. They realize that analytics is more of a discovery process than an engineering process that IT is typically used to. And then, another thing you mentioned, this mindset of kind of fail fast, where, failure is not penalized, but failure is seen as a way to learn. I'm just curious from anybody, on the panel, if you're seeing some key kind of cultural themes, mindset themes in organizations. That's just, if you have that, it's going to make this journey easier. While if you had a kind of more old school mindset, you would just struggle.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that in some of the big companies that I've worked for in the past. So where I felt that there's been the biggest impact has been buy-in from the CTO or the director, and the mindset that they've had is very open and innovative, and they want to try different technologies. They want to compare, using Tableau versus or using Alteryx, using Alteryx versus Python. And seeing where the efficiencies in speed lies. And as a data analyst, it gives you sort of the freedom to explore different things as well and to upskill and learn. And I think this culture of learning and upskilling is something that is really important and really only happens when you get buy-in from the top. Because this idea of Vic, you mentioned that Tableau's one of the big things that they say about data culture is commitment. That takes commitment from the data analyst. Data analysts can only put in commitment if they're given time and they're given the freedom and the space to fail, to try different things, to explore the data, and not necessarily, come up with all of the answers, but have that space and creativity to grow.
And Lane, you make a really good point, and it's something where I would maybe call them traditional or old-fashioned leaders. They sometimes have that expectation that when they hire an expert or someone with advanced skills, that they know everything all the time, every answer to every question. But we are in an industry where so much is constantly changing and developing. If you look at Tableau's product, every quarter we get a release of Tableau Desktop. Every month we get a release of Tableau Prep. We can't be experts in something that hasn't been created yet, but that's going to drop tomorrow. So I think there needs to be that appreciation that, maybe if you're in a job where it's your hands that provide the skill, you're a carpenter, you're a hairdresser, or you're a builder. When you get to a certain level of expertise, you can tackle a new thing. But as soon as a new material comes out, you also need to then figure that out. But we all need to continue learning. And even if you come in as an expert, you will only stay an expert or keep that expertise up if they give you the chance to learn, if they give you that space, and also accept that you're not always going to get it right. But by having the ongoing communication and an open channel, you will get it more right than wrong. And that's in their interest as well.
And that, I think, brings up a very, very good point around this topic of talent, which we see as another core foundational element to data culture. Is everybody talks about data culture, everybody says it's important, but what I'm seeing organizations not do is create that time in people's work where they can actually learn the skills that they need to, that give them that time to go experiment. It's almost like Google used to talk about that 20% time. I feel like if organizations need to really go and get everybody to become data centric, data literate, if they don't create the time, what happens is you have those pockets of users who are doing it on the weekends, doing it at nights, that become good because they're investing. But everybody's got a day job, and today's day, especially with the pandemic and business being tough, it's just getting executives to buy in. So I'm just curious if you've seen anything out there where executives are freeing up time for people to invest in their data literacy, or is this you got to figure this out on the weekend and nights?
So I would say in my team, we absolutely give people the freedom to do that. And what we're finding is that we have a mix of talent. So we have some existing people that have been around for a while, and we're also bringing some new external talent into the organisation as well. And we always say to the team, take some time to go and take part in our internal activities and the external ones. So we've got Simon Beaumont, who runs a monthly storytelling with data challenge, where he takes some stuff that's come from Colin Affleck and runs that. And absolutely none of that has anything to do with JRL data. It might be build an annotated line chart, and someone will talk about sports data, someone will talk about quantified self. But the skills they learn in that will come back and improve the visualizations and dashboards that we build going out there. We encourage people to go and play with the betas, get onto the beta program, get onto the alpha program, have a look at what's coming and see what they can do. we try and encourage people to get involved in the community as well. So look at blogs, look at Twitter, look at all the community activities that are currently going on. Get online with your local user groups. And in the pandemic, it's been fantastic in that you've been able to get involved in user groups you would never normally be able to, because they've moved from face to face to being virtual. So you get to really get involved in groups that you would not ever see. And every one of those is a learning experience for me as well as the team, right? And we often try and bring in some short-term talent. So, Lane, you're part of the data school at the Information Lab. I've always got data school people coming in because they've got fresh thinking, new ideas. It could be 6 months ago they'd never even used Tableau, and now they're some of the best users in the world. So they can help to bring some of that in, help us answer problems in a different way, and look at something with a fresh pair of eyes that historically you can sometimes get a little bit blinkered with. So, we try and build out a set of standards and best practices of how our dashboards should look, and then we train people in that, but then also try and publish that externally. So I'm quite big that we should be giving back to the community as well, and not many people know who JOL are and what we do, but if we can give back and help with design standards and design thinking and help people grow, then that's important for me, for the community, because then the community gets better, pushes the products get better, and then as a result we get the benefit of that coming back in.
Anyone else seeing like some cool ways companies are freeing up time, or is this pretty much you got to find the time yourself?
So I had my experience previously, because I think it's probably more common that it's very structured in consulting. And I used to work for Deloitte in New Zealand, and once a month we all got together, and the junior consultants that I was part of, we had structured learning time where our peers would teach us. And this was in addition to all the stuff you learn on the job, because in consulting, as long as you're paired up with someone more experienced, I mean, you learn so much every single day just by working with them and, observing in meetings and all of that. But having dedicated time where it's like, okay, you're going to learn about this and you're going to learn about this, or you're going to do this certification, I think that's really important. And the more confident people are, and that probably comes with a bit of experience and time on the job or in the organization, it's also about taking that time, I would say. It's because, yes, sure, companies should be progressive and say, hey, take, 2 hours a week to do whatever project, but they might not have that in place. They might not even have thought about it, but that doesn't mean they're against it. So it's about saying, okay, when is a good day for me that's typically not as busy with BAU and meetings and calls? When can I actually put this time aside? And for me, a Friday is actually pretty good, especially maybe a Friday afternoon. And then I block that time in my calendar. And if something comes up that's super urgent, then something comes up that's super urgent. I'll deal with that. But it does give me that blocker where I can say, okay, I'm going to learn this, or I'm going to do some research. Because for me, it's not always about a specific tool or specific technical skills, but it's also about researching, learning more about the market, learning more about specific industries, and making that time for myself by putting a block on my calendar and writing some notes ahead of time of this is what I'm going to do during this time slot really helps me take control of my own learning. And if someone questions it, I can always tell them, hey, this is what I'm going to use that time for, and that's why I think it's valuable. But I do recognize that it comes with a bit of a need for the confidence to actually do that. But I want to encourage people to try it out.
I like what you're suggesting, where you're saying, hey, even if there is no official mandate, and it probably can't be an official mandate, but each of us needs to take ownership. And sometimes you can just block off a couple hours, and we always can block off a couple hours where nobody's so busy that you can't block off a couple hours. And oftentimes, if you just block it off, like you said, every Friday afternoon for 2 hours, I blocked it off. It just is an easy. I think I like the easy fix of how to go about doing it.
Yeah, and I would say at the same time, I'm also someone who's the first to say, don't overstretch yourself. Yes, I do things in my personal time, but probably not as much as some people might think, in terms of, learning and building my skills. Some of it creeps into work time, and some of my work might creep into my personal time. And the whole work-life balance is a topic for another discussion, but I think people need to see what works for them. Some people want to spend their evenings and weekends learning Tableau or learning another tool or doing this or that, and that's perfectly fine. But for me personally, after a day in front of the screen, I don't want more time in front of a screen. I want to, maybe make dinner and then read a book. And I think it's okay, even if hundreds of others are doing it that way, for you to not do it that way and find your own way of doing it. And when it comes to, because, we're talking about Tableau and the communities and all that, when it comes to data visualization, maybe that learning time and research time is browsing Pinterest for some great design ideas. If you just type in business dashboard on Pinterest, you can spend hours. You can look at colors, you can look at, oh, this one looks really good. I do that sometimes if I look for a new layout. I'm like, I'm not a designer, I don't know where to start, but if I see something, I can try and recreate it. So it's not just about learning calculations and, really advanced visualizations, but maybe a bit of pen and paper and sketching something out.
For me as well, when it comes to learning something new or upskilling myself, I found that it's quite effective to try and align that to my everyday work. So part of it, so I've been trying to learn JavaScript on the side and building sort of web data connectors or integrations into Tableau. I've spoken to my manager and I've sort of introduced him to the idea of, this is what what we can do with the web data connector. These are the possibilities. And I'm seeing that there could be an application for this in the business. So, I've then been given the opportunity to go spend 2 days on, building a web data connector. If you can do it, then great. If not, then we'll sack it off. We'll try another solution. But in that way, if you can try to think of something that you want to develop, and if you can try to find a way that could be applicable to the business and the team that you're working in, it will also benefit them, because that innovation, that thinking of, this is a possible solution that we didn't think was even a problem beforehand, but actually now we can say with this new skill or with this new tool that you're interested in, that could be possible. And so it not only helps you, but also helps the team and allows to, it gives you the time to learn that skill.
Yeah, I love the kind of where you're taking this with, it's a directed learning and it's tied to, hey, this can help the business. So now you're learning, but you're also applying. And I think all of us would agree that kind of learning by doing is probably the best way to learn, rather than just go read up on how to do visualizations.
Absolutely.
The next question is,
I think, sorry, Vic, I was just going to say on Eva's point there, about she's not a designer, right? And I think business users often think, because somebody can build a Tableau dashboard, they're fantastic at data prep, they're fantastic at design, they just automatically feel that people have all of these skills, and we don't, right? We all have our own specialisms and we all have our own areas of expertise, but as long as you've got somewhere to go and be able to look at that, or there's a scheme or some guidance, then that can help you with that. But I still think the businesses do have this expectation that because you can build a dashboard, you can do all of these other things that are associated with it, which might not necessarily be in your skill set. And we should also encourage our teams to be upfront about saying, well, actually, that isn't what I do. I can go away and learn, but it's not a natural thing just because I can build a great dashboard.
Yep, definitely. So kind of coming to some big funding questions. What are your thoughts on, from a commitment standpoint, have you seen cases where companies have had to invest in having that structure in place? There is an organization or a group of people or a COE that is actually driving this in the organization, creation of the data culture, versus, it's more ad hoc. And so I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on which is a better approach.
So my personal experience is, having seen it in different companies, but also, in the community, it typically does start organically with a couple of champions, some people that are really passionate and who want to start something. I doubt that it would work if it's dictated from the top and it becomes kind of like a chore for someone to do. And they pick someone and they're like, you're the person, you need to build this out. But in saying that, when it starts organically, it gets to a point where you need the structure, you need some sort of process around it, maybe a bit more formality, just to make sure that it continues being successful. And I think that's when that from the top interference is really helpful to say, okay, we recognize this is a real thing. It adds value. We wanted to continue to add value. We are now going to create a position or a couple of positions so that people can dedicate maybe their full job to it. And we're going to hire someone with experience, and then that comes about, but it kind of merges the two worlds together. You've got that groundswell of passionate people who love data and who love working with data, and then you have someone who can channel all their energy into something that's super productive going forward, but who can also manage the governance, the structures, and the dealing with the top. And that's probably something where Paul has quite a few comments to add.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail absolutely on the head there. I've probably spent 2 years in our organisation trying to convince the business that we needed to take some of the great pockets of work that we did. And, we've had some fantastic, innovative people setting cultures, but all in their own swim lanes, right? And, we finally set up our global organisation to do this start of this year. So, February, I was the single person in that organisation. We've now got about 65 people in, and there's probably another 100 coming, because we're actually looking at how we centralise all of these analysts, and in some of our departments, they might have been 30 strong. So my old team, we had a team about 25, 30 people. On other areas of the business, though, you might have less than one person working for a specific account, right? Spending a couple of hours. And so by bringing them together, showing them the culture and what we can do and develop going forward, and coming back to the business and really, talking about margin, right? So if you want to get sponsorship and we want to get sign off, then we have to show that there's a value in doing it. So my team's an overhead. We don't charge any profit internally. It's all about enabling the business to reduce their costs. So we have to be able to quantify that. And through doing that, that allows us to build out a global organisation now, and regional leadership, have this community of excellence function, which, actually doesn't do anything specifically for clients, but helps to enable the team to be able to do it, and provides that coaching and training and growth and support and the practices that we can go and do that. So, yes, it does come back to, for me in a large organisation, having the way of quantifying what we're doing from a benefit to the organisation, but also still having that executive sponsorship who believe in taking something that you've already delivered in a small POC or in a small area and being able to grow that out across the business.
So I know we're coming up on about a few minutes to the top of the hour. And to wrap it up, maybe a final question, each one of you can. Let's take an organization that is starting out on this journey. They have a few, champions, people who care about it, the executive sponsorships kind of there. They've seen the value of data. Where would you ask them to start their journey? So if each of you could just, pick like one or two things that you would say, hey, absolutely, go think about, this journey, start over here. What would that be?
Okay, I'll start. I would recommend starting with something that's small and manageable, and depending on what the capabilities are or the capacity for doing something, maybe take what's already there. And I'm thinking of community projects that they could just latch onto. Like what Paul suggested around the storytelling with data workshops that Simon runs internally, or any of the other projects, and say, hey, let's use either the project directly for our purposes and do that internally, or use the idea, let's use the idea, but with our own data. So if we take Makeup Monday as an example, let's pick a dashboard that we have internally that no one really uses anymore, and or that people say is hard to use, and let's pick it apart and see if we can just improve the visuals and see if that makes a difference. And with that, to get started on who wants to be involved, who is kind of engaging with these ideas, who's keen to come, maybe, well, I don't want to suggest during a lunch break because people should have their lunch break, but who's keen to come to this additional thing and who's curious, and then maybe make it a regular thing, once a month, once a fortnight, once a week, and see where that takes you. Because I think if you overplan everything from the beginning, it's like, oh my God, all this effort and it goes nowhere. Just start with one small change and see where that goes.
Yeah, for me, the advice that I would give is that to to get people excited about using the data, we have to make it as easy and smooth as possible. And to get it to be as easy and smooth as possible, the data behind it all, so the data collection, the data structure, all of that stuff has to kind of already be ironed and sorted out, so that when you plug and play into something like Tableau, the users, it's an easy and smooth experience that they have, and that encourages them to do even more. Whereas if they come across loads of data issue problems, they're going to have to do blending and all sorts of things that's going to create barriers that can be overcome, I think, quite easily.
Yeah, and I would just say, if you speak to one of my peers at UBS, Paul Benove, he says go out to the community, because if you're trying to learn something new or you're trying to answer a question, it's probably already been thought about and answered somewhere else, right? So Tableau Blueprint, I think, is a great blueprint for helping you to understand how you can build out the various elements and think about engagement, and it has some papers in there that can help you with questions you can ask and how you can maybe quantify your ROI and where you start internally. But then I would also go back and look at previous Tableau conferences, right? The fantastic thing with those is that all of the customer sessions are recorded, they're all available on YouTube. The amount of those that I've watched to get ideas and guidance, or I've read on Twitter that this was a great talk, and it helped someone set the scene for what they wanted to do. I've picked loads of things up from those. So I'd say there's elements that we've created organically, but actually a lot of things are kind of you take off the shelf from what the community's already done and then just customise for your own particular needs, because there isn't a clear storyboard that you say, this is your starting point, this is chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and at the end you've got a data community and a data culture, right? Every business is different about how their ecology is set up and how their actual ways of working are. So there isn't a straightforward playbook, but you can take elements of the ones that have already been done. And I think the community's already got a great amount of knowledge out there that you can bring in and help to grow yourself and your teams.